Hey everybody, hope you're doing good. Today I'm going to be painting Edgar. I worked on his face for a little bit the other day, and now I'm just building up the rest of him, trying to get all my values reading. I'm going to do some color adjustment things in the face, but for the most part I feel pretty good about it so far. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm just rendering up his armor now, trying to get all these values reading correctly. I don't have a clear guide of what exactly he's wearing from Amano's art because Amano's art is very abstract and there's a lot of patterns and things, but he doesn't define any kind of patterns in his style. So I'm more or less making it up as I go, and hopefully it feels enough like it. We'll see. So I hope that you're happy and healthy and everything's good. My wife just worked all night, so she's sleeping. I'm trying not to be too loud, but I think she has earplugs in. She worked the night shift at the hospital. Wish I could tell you any of the funny things that she tells me sometimes, but I can't. I was thinking about today, the last time I went to Louisiana. I went there for, was it Louisiana? No, it was Mississippi, but we flew into Louisiana. But went there for a wedding, one of my wife's friends. And while we were there, we were hanging out with some of like the best men of the, group. And it's just multiples of them, multiple best mans. And some groomsmen. And this one guy was blind. It was really funny. He had a walking stick and everything, and he's a pretty redneck dude. But I had to sit next to him in the like rehearsal part, and he was looking at his. Well, he wasn't like completely blind. He was just kind of blind, and I saw in his phone when he was uh, standing there, somebody texted him. He had to hold up like an old Nokia phone with the little screen. He had to hold it right up to his face, and it just said, it said something like, "Can I get some pills?" And I was like, "Oh, you're a drug dealer. That's cool, man." And it was really funny because the dude who was getting married was a cop, and the night that I went out with like him and his friends before he got married, which is weird because I don't know any of them, and I just felt like, oh, these guys don't want me there. Like I'm a friend of his fiance's friend. I mean, well, I'm not a friend. Husband of the fiance's friend. It's like I'm sitting up there with these guys who all known each other their whole lives. And I'm just like, hey, what's going on? Good night, huh? Hey, you're a free man for a little bit longer. I didn't do any of that shit. I just drank. I drank so much. I was like, I don't want to be here. I'm just going to try and get as drunk as possible. I don't want to be in Mississippi right now with a bunch of people I don't know, feeling like I don't even know what wheel I would have been. Maybe like the 15th wheel. And yeah, these guys are all hanging out. And so this cop, he was like, I was just driving with him alone to meet up with everybody else. And before we go, he's like, you want something to drink? And I was like, yes, absolutely. I want something to drink. I want to not be here too. Can you get me out of here? But he got me a drink, and he made it for me. We got in the car, and he just had to like, we just had drink holders for our alcohol. We were just driving around Mississippi, getting shit faced, going to the bar. And I was like, this is real strange, man. I was like, so we got glasses of whiskey with ice in them, and we're just driving around town, and you're a cop. Things seem pretty relaxed around here. And he's like, yeah. It's no big deal. But man, that was in Jackson, Mississippi. We ended up going to a bunch of bars and things, and I kind of felt bad just because there's really nothing there. If you've ever been to Jackson, Mississippi, it's pretty run down. Like all of the downtown, well, pretty much the whole downtown is like shut down. There's a lot of like abandoned looking buildings, and with like the ceilings caved in, because I was staying at the hotel across the street from like this one building where you could look out the hotel window and you could see down through the floors of the place. It was just completely caved in. It was really bad. But yeah, it was a rough neighborhood, and there's a lot of like violence and things. And I had a homeless dude run at me while I was wearing a suit on my way to go to the wedding, and I was just like, oh shit, here we go. I had to like jump in the car and slam the door because he just full on sprinted at me. I was like, what's he gonna try and do? It was pretty boring, really. I don't know how people do it. I couldn't survive in one of those towns. Like sometimes I feel where I live is pretty boring, and around Denver, and like I could end up going over to Jackson, and you're like, oh shit, there is literally nothing going on here. Some parts of the U.S. are like that. They're just desolate places. If you've ever seen True Detective, it's like what Russ says about the town that they're in. He goes, it's like a memory of a town. That's exactly right. That's what those places feel like. They feel like a memory of a town, not a town. That was the spot that we went to. Well, the hotel we were at, me and Kim were like, well, let's see if there's anything around here. So we did like a Google search for what's there to do in Jackson. Because I was thinking, like, maybe we could go see some alligators or something, or I don't know what's around there. I thought maybe we'd be able to go check out something. And then number one on the list was this historic old building. And they were like, this is a, famous old building in Jackson, and if you have a chance, you should stop by and check it out because it's really pretty inside and all this. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Where's it at? It turned out it was the place we were in when we were Googling that. It was the hotel we were staying at. That was the fancy old building in Jackson that you have to go see. I was like, uh-oh. There really is nothing. But yeah, this is how like small town it was. It kind of reminded me of where I grew up. A lot of similar stuff going on. But one of the dudes that we went out with, well, I don't know if he was the number one best man or what, but one of those dudes, he didn't show up to the wedding, and we were like, what happened? Like, where did that dude go? Because he was with us the whole night. And then we found out at the wedding that he was arrested the night before, and he wasn't going to show up. You're like, oh shit, there you go. It's pretty funny. People are really nice though. And my wife made a lot of friends. I don't know how. I don't really think she keeps in touch with anybody just because once you have a kid, that kind of all goes away. But you bring my wife around really like any group like that, and she just immediately falls in, and people start talking to her and they like her. And I usually have a pretty good time meeting new people. I don't have any weird social stuff, but I don't get along with dudes who make believe that they don't have any kind of insecurities. That's kind of where I'm like, I checked out of this. I'm not going to make believe that you're all macho men and we're all perfectly cool and All you guys are just these bulletproof dudes. That stuff is so lame to me. I'm like, ugh, like, come on, man. Let's talk about the weird porn you watch and have a good time. I don't care for this insecurity shit. But that's what that was, so I didn't really. I kind of checked out. I was like, all right. As soon as I start talking about weird stuff, everybody's like, nah, we're good. I'm like, yeah, I am too. We went to New Orleans. I think we went there before and after the wedding, and that was pretty cool. I've been to New Orleans a few times. That's a awesome little city to go to. I know the whole thing's not perfectly great, but we're not from around there, so the whole French Quarter part, aside from the drunks and everything, is really cool. Good food and ton of antique shops with like amazing stuff. If you ever around New Orleans in that area, you should go to some of the antique shops and check out everything they got. I saw so many cool old like French style antiques and beautiful old like weaponry and things, lots of guns and stuff. I really wanted to buy a bunch, but I didn't because you can't be spending all that money on antiques that you have to ship back to your home. But man, it was so cool. Trying to get this hand right. I have to keep pulling up my own fist and looking at it. Let me see. Okay. I mean, that's okay. It's not great though. Let me get that. All right. I've been seeing a lot of the people protesting the shutdown of the country. All that's pretty funny. I don't really pay a ton of attention to that side of things so much, like politics online and all that outrage stuff. But I only really get to see like what my wife's dealing with in the hospitals. It's pretty interesting to see like the disconnect between people. So it's like I don't care about politics at all, or like news media and all that shit. It's like, but it is pretty rough in the hospitals. They're getting like trash bags for my wife to wear and all that. Sucks. Like, is she gonna be safe in that? No, not at all. Nah, she's good. I wish I could say like anything that I actually know about a lot of that stuff, just because I can't violate anything that, my wife has told me from the hospital. But in the beginning of all this, there's some pretty crazy shit going on. People dying and things that were close to us, my wife. And you'd see at the same time like people, I mean, even like my brother wasn't like denying it, but he didn't really understand why people were doing things. And I had to keep telling him, I'm like, somebody that's like, younger than me that we don't like know, but kind of know through circles, died of it. And a bunch of other people, like an entire family was in the hospital and all this. And then also like Dan Warren, my writing partner on Steve Lichman, his mom had cancer just recently and had been going through chemo last year, just like the end of last year, and she has to go in for follow-up tests and things. And for somebody like that, it's so scary to go to the hospital. It's like, you're so compromised because of all the chemo and everything, and obviously that you had cancer, that going to a hospital is just, I can't even imagine how scary that would be. Just to go in there and know that there's a chance that you'll get this thing, and then if it's bad and you have a reaction, like, well, I mean, you would because you had chemo, but like, oh, that could just kill you. It's so crazy. Because to me, it's like, even if you're like anti-politics, anti all like the stupid shit that everybody's getting mad about, you still have to realize that there's people with recovering from cancer that just, if they get, even if they get the regular flu, they're fucked. It's like, let alone this thing. It's really rough. I just hope that everybody's doing okay. I posted up this video that's really cool on Twitter. You should check it out. It's from the studio that became, or I think a lot of people from this studio became what Gynax is, or eventually went to Gynax. I don't know if they founded it. I'm not exactly sure the history of it, but they had this studio, I believe it was called Daikon Film, and they had this little convention where they showed off their animation in like the opening presentation, I guess. So they put together like a demo reel for what they were doing, and it's from a group of basically amateur animators at the time, and they put out the most ludicrous shit. So good. If you want to see that, I have it up. It's like a homage to all sci-fi stuff, and it's basically, the reason it's so cool to me, beyond it just being a crazy amount of work and this great presentation of what they can do, it's just so great to see what it really takes to make it in an industry. You have to go out of your way to show people what you can do. Otherwise, people aren't just going to give you what you want. You have to show what kind of direction you can bring to something like animation. Like, what's special about you? And they definitely did that with that video and whatever else. But man, when you see that, and it was done in 1983, which is really crazy. It was done so early. And the quality of the animation, nothing really touches it. As far as animation in that time, even animation now, there's not like a ton of amazing hand-drawn animation coming out right now. But when you see that Gynax, the Daikon clip, just blows you away. So well done. And it's not like they were making money from that video in and of itself. There's so many references to so many things that you just can't monetize that. But to just show what you're able to do with all of those properties is great. I love that. it just kind of flies in the face of everybody saying like, oh, you can't get anything from doing fan art. Like, well, why would you waste your time doing that? Like, because everybody starts working for somebody and developing a reputation for the most part. There are people that can do it without that, but a lot of times you start by generating a following through another vehicle. You know, a lot of the most famous people start somewhere, end up somewhere else. It's hard to come out of the gate a fully formed person with a following and everything without getting that partially from other places. You know, you get a lot of that from having people see your work in something like Marvel or something like video games or wherever, and then you bounce from that to doing your own personal stuff, and hopefully the people that liked what you did for those companies or on those properties like it enough that they want to see what you'll do on your own. And that's what that Daikon clip is. It's just showing people what you could do with all of these things, even though you're not working for them necessarily. And then hopefully those groups hire you on to do something, or you get something similar, whatever else. It's just a great reminder of what it takes to really succeed. Such a crazy portfolio piece for a company or a studio. So I think people forget that that's how you get ahead. You don't have to just come out of the gate showing some original thing. And you always have people asking, how do you do your own thing? How do you get eyes on it? How do you have people actually find what you're doing? And there's a chance that you can just get that organically by putting something out that works, but another way of doing it is to do a version of what you were doing for yourself, but for someone else, so that people become accustomed to seeing your work in that field and then breaking away and doing what you want to do for your own thing. Like, look at Sean Murray. Sean Murray? Is that right? The guy who did he did the new White Knight for DC. Sean Gordon Murphy. Am I getting that right? I keep wanting to say that, but I keep feeling like that's somebody in movies and that I'm getting the name wrong. But Murphy? Something like that. Anyway, so he worked for DC for a while and then wanted to do more writing, so I'm not exactly sure how he got this, but he pitched the White Knight idea, got that became super successful DC book, and now he's stopped working on DC things and he's doing his own thing. So he's producing his own original story, but he got known for writing by doing that first, and now he's going to do his own thing, writing his own comic. And I don't know if he's going to do a Kickstarter or what, but he's been releasing concepts and little page previews online, and they look really good. So it's nice to show, you know, that roadmap of how you kind of get to that place, that you don't just have to start and figure it out from scratch, that you have a career beforehand and then it grows into this thing. Same thing with the guy who did Black Sad. You know, he started at Disney and then made Black Sad, and Black Sad ended up being like if Disney were made, you know, if a Disney movie were made for adults, and this, you know, detective story with murder and sex and violence and, you know, mystery, thriller kind of thing, and just kind of carved out his own lane. while leveraging everything that he got from that previous place. But to come out just out of the blue and have everything down, it's pretty difficult. You can do it, for sure. It's just difficult. We had that with Steve Lichman. We didn't really have any kind of like, nobody read it because of who I was or who Dan was. People didn't even know that we were the ones who did it. It was just, comedy just kind of works online, and it's way easier to get something that's funny spread around than something that's super serious and like action packed and all that. I feel like that's a much harder sell. But you can grab somebody in 2 seconds with a joke. It's much easier to do that, in my opinion. I mean, it's not like it's easy to tell a good joke, but it's much easier to get something like that to spread because, you know, people want to share things that make them laugh. And like, look at memes and everything else. That's what spreads the most. There aren't like a ton of super serious posts that are as viral as something that's just funny. But that was something where we had that come out and it kind of could live on its own, which was nice. But I feel like that's super rare, especially if you want to do, like I'm saying, some kind of serious book. Like, it would be really difficult for me to get Starvale, the comic I did. You can go, if you Google that, Starvale, you can see what I had. Or I think you just go to my website, just daveraposa.com, click comics in the tab, and then it'll bring you over to my comics section. You can look at that. The story's shit. I just wrote something issue to issue, and it was before I ever wrote really anything. And I just kind of wanted an excuse to make something. But that would have been really difficult to get legs because you have to be invested in the story. It can't just be a one-off comic that's funny and then you can share that around. It has to be something that pulls you in and you get readers over time, like a snowball effect, growing and growing and growing. It's just a lot harder. All I'm really saying is make sure to leverage opportunities into other opportunities. That's what I did with all of my fantasy work. That's how I got into doing D&D and Magic. It was just a ladder progression. Just, if I do this and this and this, I'll have enough portfolio pieces that'll hopefully lead into this, this, and this. So if I have enough D&D stuff, it looks enough like Magic, where then hopefully Magic will hire me to do their stuff, and so on and so forth. I did that with every job leading into every other job. Just take jobs that feel a little bit closer to your end goal over and over until you're at the place you want to be. It's going to take a little bit of time. But you can get there. The mistake I made with this piece, I mentioned it in the Q&A I did last night, the April Q&A. But the mistake I made was that I didn't go in and make these lines darker initially. So you can see how I'm basically having to repaint all of these lines. I could have just duplicated the lines in a multiply layer or something and made them darker so that I didn't have to go through and do this. So now I'm just essentially going over everything to put what emphasis was already there from the original drawing, redrawing the whole thing, which is a waste of time. But, you know, you live and learn, and I won't make this mistake again. I thought that by doing this with the lighter lines that I'd get more of a painterly look, but you always misread your values when you're building them slowly. You always think you're maybe going too dark or maybe too washed out and bright, and you kind of tamp all that stuff back over and over. When in reality, it's like you're not really, like, once you start adding in color and start building the values, you start to realize that, oh, those blacks aren't really that black and the lights aren't so bright. So that's what happened with this piece. So I'm trying to bring it back to kind of where it was with the drawing. Because I realized by working in the mid-tone underpainting, I kind of lost a lot of the detail in the armor because because the lines weren't dark enough, the lines here, because they weren't dark enough, they ended up kind of getting lost in the underpainting because I didn't have the contrast of just the white canvas, if that makes any sense. I noticed that when I did it in the Setzer part of the painting up here, I basically had to kind of phone in those details on the armor because I couldn't really see what they were originally, which isn't good. I changed up on my latest magic card work, and that stuff all has the right kind of read on values. So ended up coming together pretty quickly. Just trying to find any real way to speed up my process and not lose any kind of quality. And that's important to me, to make sure that it still looks good and finished and hopefully better than the last thing I did. That's my goal with every new thing I'm doing, is just keep learning, keep improving, keep growing. So as long as it doesn't feel like a cheap shortcut and it feels like a natural progression of skill, then that's where I'm leaning with each piece, whatever I can get to the next place. And I was talking last night in the Q&A about having some kind of legacy beyond, just kind of having these pieces exist in the moment. And I hope that I can get there. I know that that's like a big thing to want. And I don't really want it for me. I want it for my kid. And, I want him to see all that work and feel like, he can do something like that. So I'm trying now kind of more than ever to use these pieces, not so much to just do fan art, but just to develop my skill enough so that over time, as I keep pushing myself and keep growing, that I can get to a place where I can produce work that's high quality and can outlast me, basically. It wouldn't be the end of the world if that didn't happen, but I'm going to try. I know that won't happen with stuff like this, because this is more or less just to kind of sharpen skills, and it is, fan art, so I don't expect it to be. I don't expect like anything I'm doing with this stuff to really be that, but once I start doing more personal work, then I think I'll get closer to that goal. We'll see. I'm pretty hopeful though. And I know that if I push myself, I can get somewhere close. At least whatever I think that kind of success looks like, I can get close to it. It is so weird how that works. Having any kind of legacy. Like, what does that mean? Like, what do you do? I hope that I can have that eventually in teaching and things, and then also the work. I'm hoping that with the Patreon and subsequent work that comes from clients based off the work that I'm doing through the Patreon, that I can get enough of a stable income where I just don't have to do so much private client work, and I can do more personal work and also do more teaching things, live demos and all that. I think that would be great. I mean, it just helps you learn too. When you teach your process over and over, you learn your process again, and you're always aware of what you're doing. I always thought teaching was great for that. You're always reaffirming what you've learned, and kind of by teaching someone else how to do it, you further memorize how you do it, and you explore. By teaching someone else how to, you explore kind of what it really meant to find that thing, and what's the important information, what's like the effective piece of this technique that works for you. And when you explore that thought, you kind of, I feel like you come into it a little bit easier, and it cements a bit more. Because you can lose things pretty quick. At least I can. I don't have a great memory. Thankfully, I haven't had to really do too much besides art and just having my family, which is awesome. Because I felt before we had a kid that we had to do so many other things, travel-wise, or just other commitments. And I don't know if you're like this, but for me, as soon as I do another thing, like travel somewhere and then come back to working, there's this whole reset period where I almost have to get back into the mindset of like doing art, and it's so difficult for me because I kind of get tunnel vision, and I'll get into a certain mindset, like if I'm in a place, or I would not like on vacation, but just somewhere not doing what I do daily, and I almost forget how to work, and it takes me a bit of time to kind of get back into the mindset, and I almost have to relearn a lot of things. I don't know if I would have that problem now necessarily, but I used to have it a lot. And I mean that because I feel my process is so locked in right now that I don't know if I would actually have that problem. Maybe it's just an irrational fear. But I definitely had it for a long time. It also has to do with not having satisfying work. Because when you don't have work that makes you happy, or just excited to work daily, then I feel it's really easy to not want to do it when you come back to it. And sometimes that can feel like you've lost it somehow, but in reality, it's probably that you just want to continue to relax and not do this boring work. Okay. I'm feeling pretty good about the armor so far. Just have to keep building values. When people say to lean into your strengths, I think I kind of didn't understand what my strengths were until recently. I was like, I don't know what leaning into your strengths means. Is that like your crutches? Like the things that hold you back? Because I feel like I don't want to do that. But then I realized my strength is that I can sit and do details for hours, and people don't do that usually. So I was like, oh, cool. I have one of those things. I can zone out and just draw a million little details in a character and feel okay with it. And you can get away with details as long as they sit in a shape that's readable. Then you can get away with a lot of details. There just needs to be room to breathe in the painting, so you can't go and do everything detailed. That's why all the characters here are sitting in a big no, they're based on the composition of the shape of the crystal from Final Fantasy. So as long as they all live within the size of the shape of the crystal, and the background's relatively simple, like simple colors, then there's some relief for your eyes. You're not like overwhelmed by the amount of detail going on. So you can instantly read that it's a big single crystal shape, and within that shape is a bunch of detail, followed by areas of rest like the capes and, flowing big sections of color. But in general, it's not like I'm going to fill this whole thing. I wouldn't do like monsters all the way to the edges and then stuff everywhere else, because it's just too much. It becomes overwhelming. You don't have anywhere to really focus. You need something that's easily identifiable. And that's why I use shapes and compositions like that, because you can see really quickly that it's a diamond. And then from there, you can read beyond that shape. But that shape is the immediate read. You need something simple so that you're not overwhelmed when you look at it. And not that you can't go for something more complex. You definitely can. It just depends on what you're doing and the balance you're striking in the piece. You have to think about that. What's really a bummer though is looking at this and like the way that this is rendering here, the like multicolors and the shoulder pad thing. I keep thinking how easy it would be to do one of the Final Fantasy VI bosses like Atma Weapon and get across those like Amano multicolor skin looks with the underlying texture the way I have it right now. I feel like that would work really well, and I have to control myself in not doing that. Because I so badly want to do that. Like, oh, that'd be perfect. Just get that kind of textury look in the leathery skin of that monster. It would work so well. But one thing at a time. I can't get pulled in too many directions. I have to stay focused. I have such a problem with focus. That's why the background's black. That's why I'm doing one character at a time instead of every character at once, like a lot of painters would do. People say to work up each piece, like balanced, like bouncing between things. If I did that shit, this would never get done. I have to do one thing at a time. Otherwise, I'll get overwhelmed. It's funny, when I had if you listen to the interview I did with on Art Cafe with Mache Cusiera, however you say that name. In that interview, I talked about how I had OCD, which is completely wrong. That's not what I meant to say. I meant to say ADD. And I get that way with things like this. If there's a million little details that need rendering, I'll hop back and forth between everything. And it's just not good. I can't be doing that. Like, I can so easily be like, oh, look, I can just work on her hair. Ooh, I'll do this, these little beads. And then nothing of substance ever gets done. So I got to work big to small. What are the big shapes? Render those out. Make sure those values work. And then keep on going to little stuff. But don't get caught up in doing every little thing all the time. I always have to stop myself. So I've tried to have that discipline, and that's part of the reason I'm doing these huge pieces too. It's just to get my patience way up. I have to be able to sit with these things and create bigger images. And I don't want to just do little flash in the pan pictures that aren't going to really be anything. I can't remember what these beads are. Oh, right. There it is. It's like I don't remember what these things are even doing on this piece. So they're like brown beads. I don't know how well that works for this one. Maybe I'll do that red. I'll do red and then like one gold one. Maybe two gold. Just something to complement the armor. So it's like tied on somewhere, I guess. Do a little thing there. I notice looking back at these videos that I stay so zoomed out of the pieces. I've tried to get into that habit so that I'm not over detailing anything, because if you zoom in, you tend to do unnecessary details that don't read when you're actually looking at the piece. So I try to stay as zoomed out as possible so that everything I'm doing comes across in the final, rather than getting lost in little nooks and crannies of the piece and being like, hey, what did I do? I spent a ton of time doing these little tiny things that in the end don't even matter to the final image. So try to work effectively, not just do a bunch of shit, you know? Like, sure, it's detailed, but at least it reads and isn't lost. So if I'm not careful, I can fall into that pretty easy, which you've probably noticed in some of my stuff. Okay, this video is rounding out to just around 50 minutes, so I'm going to stop it here, but I'll continue working on this. I just don't want to have a gigantic video up, and I want to make sure I get as much done as possible, which is easier if I'm not talking. Also, I want to show you, how it's all coming along. Anyway, I hope that this was helpful in some way. Feel free to leave a question about the process in the comments, and I'll check it out. And if I can address it, I'll address it. If not, if you feel like you want to leave it in the upcoming May Q&A, you can leave that in the post that I'm going to put up later today. So, yeah, I hope you have a good day, good week, and I'll talk to you soon, and I'll share more art, hopefully in the next couple days. All right. Bye-bye.